Hi guys, welcome back to this Web Design Tuts screencast series. My name's Ian and today we're going to work a little bit further on our magazine layout, our responsive web page layout that's based on the skeleton boilerplate. If you've been following the series so far, you should have conjured together something that looks fairly similar to what we see in front of us here. This is our layout. It's coming along very nicely. Today we're going to work on the slider, the responsive image slider, and we're going to put together a couple of other jQuery plugin elements in our footer. So let me just take a look at the result we're aiming for. If I just go to Web Design Tuts and I search for skeleton, I'll just be able to quickly come up with our demo. There it is. So this is the slider we're going to be looking at implementing. A little bit of styling there, but all very simple, and crucially of course it's responsive. And further down in our footer we have this Flickr feed and this Twitter feed, and we'll be styling everything else that you can see here. So we're not actually going to be working down the page. We're going to ignore the slideshow for the time being, and we'll jump into sorting out our footer, and then in the next video we'll look at implementing all the various JavaScript bits and bobs. Okay, so let's get started, and as always I've got my project here on the desktop, so I'm just going to open that up and let's see, we can start to add to our markup. I think that's probably the most sensible next step. So we're going to go down into our footer. Let's see, what did we have? Yes, we had our 4 columns in the main footer here, and we had our 2 columns down in this bottom footer. Now I can make our markup a little bit more semantic for a kickoff, so I'm actually going to footwear, no that's not correct, I'm actually going to replace that for a footer element. This is the one at the very bottom. Now I can, if I just copy and paste some copyright paragraph content, should just speed things along a little bit. There we go. So we have 2 columns, each one of which contains a sort of a little bit of blurb. So we're just going to add an additional class to these just to aid with styling. Nothing too crucial. First and last credit. Okay, so that's dealt with our bottom one. This is let's see, that's in the bottom, and that's fine, so we can style that perfectly reasonably. Okay, so then we've got our second one here. Again, we're going to want to switch this out for a footer because that makes things just a little bit more semantic. Of course, you can have multiple footers in any document, so that's not a problem. Now we have our 4 columns, so I'm just going to save that and see what effect that had. Okay, so we have our 2. Yep, we have our 2 copyright sentences here. That's fine. A little bit of styling on those wouldn't go amiss. So let's open up our layout style sheet, and I'm going to start adding some styling for the footer. So right down to the bottom of our layout here, let's see, footer. Now we had, what have we got? We've got our bottom footer, and I want to just make the font size a little bit smaller, and then we had, what did we have? We had a div of last credit, which I want to alter the text aligning on, like so. Okay, so that's an awful lot better. Yes, they could be paler. So I'm just going to see what colour I've assigned to these. Okay, so I'm going to add this colour to my links in all the footer. So let's try footer A, visited, and we'll add a colour like so. Here we go. Okay. Oh, and a hover. What have we assigned as our hover? Let's see. And it goes white. So let's just throw a hover state in there, like so. Text, decoration, we'll get rid of that underline and give it a nice white colour just to make things nice and clear. Alright, there we go. That's the first thing. Okay, now let's put some proper content in these 4 columns here. Firstly, we're going to need these headers, so it's probably worth mentioning how we're going to tackle that straight away. What we're going to do is, you can see that headers in this main content here, as well as the headers down in the footer, have this diagonally striped background to them. We can't just style a header element like this if we want to maintain a little bit of flexibility, because we want obviously to maintain this pattern behind them, irrespective of how big the font size is, or irrespective of how wide this header is. Let me show you, for example, if I just, let's just firstly we'll assign that a relative line height so that doesn't confuse things. I want to be able to make these headers as big as possible, and you can see that the this pattern stays true to the design irrespective of that, so that's quite handy. In order to do this, we're going to have to wrap our header. We've got our H4 here. You can see we've wrapped it in a header element. It can be whatever element you choose, but I've chosen a header. That's perfectly fine. Largely because I've separated each of these sections in the subsection to be articles, and articles usually comprise a header and a footer as well. So anyway, I'm babbling. We're going to have our header element, and we're going to wrap it in an we'll have our heading, our H4, we're going to wrap that in a header. It's the header that we're going to style with this diagonal background, and then we're going to put an additional background on our H4 in order to sort of blank it out there. So that's how we're going to approach it, and the same thing applies of course for these headings down here. So enough gibbering on about that, let's just get down to it and do it. Where are we now? Index.html, we've got our 4 columns, and let's see, well, there's a logo in the first one. I've also got some body text I can just copy and paste into that just to keep things clear, some fairly generic nonsense, and I'm just going to add, oops, what am I doing? Okay, I'm going to put an H3 in there, give it a class of logo, which is fine, and that's going to be an anchor, put a hashtag in there for the sake of argument, and then I'm going to put magazine in like that. Okay, so that's going to be our logo. We're going to swap that out in a similar fashion to the logo we did in the header in our last tutorial. Now in these other 4 columns, we don't have any of this content. That's going to be our, which one was that? Our Twitter. That's Twitter, and then recent posts. So first of all, I'm going to put my header in here, and then with an H4 element I have my Twitter, and then we'll talk about injecting the actual Twitter feed in the next screencast. Now we have our recent posts, so I think that was actually quite simple. Recent posts, and then the last one, of course, that was our Flickr feed. Again, we'll cover the actual injection of our feed in the next video, but for the time being, let's just cover these headers. I also have some content for the recent posts. It's just simply an unordered list. Let's just format this a little bit more correctly. We have an unordered list, but it's 4 list items here, simple as that. And we'll bring, what am I doing? Messing around. Okay, now we've brought everything back in line a little bit. So we'll save that. And here we go. So that's looking a little better. Quite a bit of formatting still to go. First of all, let's use our second logo, which we also catered for using our sprite. If you recall, that was this secondary one here. Okay, let's add some styling to our logo in the footer. First of all, we're going to kick off with a little bit of margin. So I'm going to add some margin to the top, 14 pixels, and to the bottom, 21. We only need the 3 values because the last value is implied as 0 if you don't enter anything. And of course those values both tie into our baseline grid, which we discussed in the previous video. So now it's time to actually start to style things properly. We have some dimensions. We have a width of 200 and a height of 35. Again, tying into our baseline grid. We'll display that as a block. Give it the background of our sprite, like so. And the values were, let's just remove the repetition. The values were 0 from the left, and we want to whack it up 50 pixels as our little grid in our sprite PSD determined, if you remember. And then of course, if you remember what we discussed last time, we're going to use this alternative image replacement technique in order to make things accessible and performant. So there we go. That's the anchor within that done. Okay, that should have dealt with it. There we go. Simple as that. That's looking good. Now we need to handle these other headers. So these are our H4s. Each one, of course, being wrapped in that header element. So footer main header. Let me first just check back onto the make sure that I've actually added that main to our footer, just in case, just so we can differentiate the two footers there slightly more effectively. So we're now pointing at our main footer, and the headers within them we want to give a background. Now I've already prepared the image, and it's just a slightly little repetitive tile with that pattern on it. It was a dark version, of course, because we do have the light version. So let's see, we want that to be a font size of 14 pixels, and we're going to give it a line height of 1 EM and a margin at the top of 28, like so. So if I save that, there we can see that's coming along quite nicely. A little bit more styling still waiting to be done. So let's see. We need to point our attention now to the actual H4 elements themselves. Font weight's going to be bold. I'm going to change the colour, obviously. It needs to be white in this case. Font size. So I shouldn't really need to determine that. But I'm going to do so anyway, just for the sake of surety. Line height of 14 pixels. They need it to be uppercase, like that. Let's see what else. We've had some letter spacing because that's advisable where uppercase characters are concerned, and of course the font family, which we need to make sure is Arial sans serif. Alright, good start. Let's have a look. Okay, excellent. Now you notice that you can still see the diagonal line behind that, so what we're going to do is add a background to that H4. So there's our background. We're going to apply the same background that's sitting in the background of the footer, which is background dark PNG. Repeat. Like so, and of course the whole lot seems to have disappeared because it's displaying as block and it's covered up the entire header element that's below it. So what we'll do now is display it in line like so. So now it's only applying to that tiny little bit there. Now let's add a little bit of let's add some padding. I want some padding on either side of it, and also we want to shove it over slightly so that we've got that little bit of diagonal pattern to the left of each one, like so. That's looking great. Okay, good. I applied a font size and a line height to this header, and I'm fairly sure that's not necessary. I know it is. We do need to reset it. Okay, so let's just put that back. Stop messing about. Okay, right. That's excellent. That's good. That all looks like it's lining properly. You can see the bottom of the logo is aligning properly to those headings as well. So that's all looking nice and neat. Now we need to add some styling to our recent post list. You can see we've got this this dotted line at the bottom of each list. Plenty of spacing. Of course, some space at the top, so let's now turn our attention to those lists in the footers. Let's add a little title in there just to aid things. Okay, footer main, and we're going to target all the list items within there. Now we want padding of 21 pixels top and bottom. Get rid of any margin because the skeleton boilerplate does stick some margin in there for us, and we actually prepared a little image to put on the bottom of each one for those stitches, and I called mine stitch staggered. I'm sure there was some logical reason at that point. Now we're only repeating it along the x-axis horizontally, and we want it along the bottom of each list item. And there we go. Now that's all looking quite fine, although it's very difficult to see with this big gap in the middle here how our alineation is affected. There's something that doesn't look quite right to my eye. Of course we set out our baseline grid in order to achieve horizontal harmony, but something doesn't look quite correct, so I'm just going to take a quick screen grab and drag that into Photoshop so I can check it out. If I drag a ruler down, I can see that none of our text is quite, it's all fairly equally spaced, but it's all just slightly offset. Now of course we've used measurements that are perfect across the board. Everything we've used is divisible by 7, so I'm guessing here that all we need to do is shunt everything. We're just offset by 7 pixels on these lists compared to this. So let's see, if I go back to Coda and I'm going to put an additional, no, tell you what, instead of adding that to the UL, I'm going to apply some additional margin to our headings. So I'm just going to add an additional 7 pixels to the bottom of our headings, and that should have shunted everything down ever so slightly, and it hasn't. Oh, because we're dealing with an inline element. So what I'll have to do is reset that. I can't apply a margin to it. I'll have to apply it to, no, I can't apply it to the header either because I need that to perfectly hug the H4. So ignore everything I've just done messing about there. I'm going to apply it to the unordered list itself, and I'm going to put a margin of 7 pixels at the top of each of those lists. Now moving back into Chrome. So finally you can see that, I'll take another screen grab just to confirm things into Photoshop, and if I bring the ruler down you'll see that irrespective of any larger gaps, margins, backgrounds, borders, whatever, we're still running nice and neatly with our 7 pixel baseline grid there. Okay, excellent. Now the next step would be to introduce our Twitter feed, introduce the image feed from Flickr, and then we can turn our attention to the slider at the top of the page. So I'll see you in the next video.